do you have marijuana growing in your backyard?
Oh, those are just my husband's plants.
Hey, mind if I talk to you for a second?
Sure.
Is that weed?
Yeah, bro, but it's legal now, right?
Good evening, sir.
I'm smelling a lot of marijuana. Do you have marijuana in the car?
Yeah, I have just a couple of grams, but it's all legal.
Is this your bag?
Yeah, the bag is mine, but the stuff inside belongs to my patients.
If it's okay with you, we'd like to come take a look at the grow.
Sure, yeah, I'd be more than happy to show you.
Okay.
Follow me.
Over the years, we've seen marijuana go from being illegal at all times to reduced offenses for possession of small amounts to becoming legal only for those with a medical need. Now, with the passage of Proposition 64, the drug can be used recreationally by those who are 21 and over. So, why should officers be concerned with enforcing marijuana laws if it appears that society wants it to be legal? In answering that question, it may be helpful to look at recent impact reports from nearby states to see what has happened after the legalization of recreational marijuana. Hello, I'm Mark Bailey, and I'll be your host. In Colorado, reports of marijuana use in middle and high schools has risen significantly. School resource officers have reported an 86% increase in marijuana-related incidents. Similar reports are coming out of Washington, where 60% of statewide student expulsions related to substance abuse specifically involved marijuana.
As a protector of society, as a protector of our communities, we have to realize that marijuana still causes problems in the community. It causes issues with our children. It causes issues with quality of life. And marijuana can't be ignored if we want to stay true to our mission of protecting the community.
Undoubtedly, we're going to see more of it because since it now has been decriminalized, anybody that was apprehensive about it because they felt that it was against the law is going to have that. If that was their only roadblock, that roadblock is now gone. Hey, I might try this, everybody's doing it, right? And as it becomes more socially acceptable, I'm sure that more young people would be willing to try it that may not have been willing to try it before it was decriminalized.
The law now says you can walk around with up to an ounce of marijuana. Potentially at your house, you could have many, many pounds of marijuana. That's going to create just what we're seeing in the other states, a black market.
While black markets continue to thrive in other states, legalization has coincided with some other concerning trends. In Washington, poison center calls related to marijuana exposure have increased nearly 80%, while Colorado has seen the number of marijuana exposure calls more than double. And both of these states have seen a marked increase in the number of marijuana-related traffic deaths since legalization. All of this may beg the question, besides recreational use becoming legal, what changes have occurred with marijuana that may contribute to these problems?
Well, what's changed with marijuana is it's gotten a lot stronger. The THC levels are higher. The growers are more adept at what they're growing.
So even in the 80s and 90s, even the early 2000s, marijuana that was consumed may contain 1 to 4% THC in that marijuana product. We see those levels today can be as high as 30% or above in plant-type marijuana, bud that's smoked, or even up to 60, 70, 80% levels in the concentrates that are becoming popular as well.
That changes what marijuana is to really even much more of a stimulant-type drug, most commonly known as BHO. It has various names, dabs, wax, shatter. It's all a solvent-extracted THC.
The process of manufacturing butane honey oil, or BHO, requires a lot of specialized equipment and brings with it significant safety issues.
When you deal with BHO labs or butane honey oil labs, an officer's going into a dwelling or a house or a residence where they are manufacturing BHO labs, they need to look for the signs. They need to look for the Petri dish with the razor blade with the concentrated cannabis in it, the wax. Then they have to start looking for other indications that they're manufacturing. Look in the trash. See if you see empty butane cans. Look if you see a glass cylinder. The glass cylinder can be glass. It can be a 2-liter bottle of soda. It can be anything that can hold the shake. But they also have to keep in mind there's a lot of safety issues involved when we have our officers in there.
There are some dangers associated with that, to include explosions and fires and other issues. There's lead and cadmium and mercury, poisonous substances in the butane that now leaches into the marijuana itself.
Butane is one that you can't see, touch, feel. But it's in the area where you're making it. It sits below the current level of oxygen, so it takes nothing to spark.
Concentrate can be made not only using caustic chemicals like butane, but can also be made using a CO2 conversion. So when doing CO2 conversions in closed-loop circuits, there's a large quantity of these gases found in these business areas, which can present another safety hazard. While it may not be an explosive environment, you could have an environment that creates an area of asphyxiation.
If you walk into a BHO extraction lab, then you need to treat it with the same care and caution that you would treat a meth lab. The amount of dangers in one of those labs could get an officer seriously hurt or even killed.
It's just a very high-risk environment that you're creating to create this concentrated cannabis. But there's motivation for it because there's so much profit in concentrated cannabis.
The Medicinal and Adult Use Cannabis Regulation and Safety Act creates one state regulatory system for licensing medicinal and adult use cannabis activity in California. As of January 1st, 2018, those engaging in commercial cannabis activity are required to have a state license.
It's not going to be a set license that's going to cover all the conduct under marijuana. There's going to be a specific license for each type of conduct that marijuana will have. In regards of a butane honey oil lab, you need a license for that. If you're going to be a transporter of marijuana from one place to another, then you're going to need a license for that. If you're going to be if you're going to be engaged in sales of marijuana or distribution of marijuana, you're going to need a licensing for that, et cetera. So each type of conduct you're going to want to go forward with, you're going to need a specific license for that.
Marijuana is big business. It is huge money.
Both of these items on a medical end and on a recreational end are kind of modeled after like big tobacco, where we're going to start to see regulations and policies as it pertains to advertising.
We're already starting to see billboards, for example, pop up along our freeways that advertise marijuana businesses and marijuana stores. In social media, on the sides of buses, at sporting events. So in essence, what they're trying to do is regulate the use, the cultivation, the sale, the distribution of the drug. But with any market, whatever you have, there's always the potential for the illicit activity that's associated with that.
As California gets into the business of marijuana, it is our job to identify those illicit activities and provide the enforcement and protections that are needed now more than ever. This program will examine the marijuana laws, explaining what is now legal and what remains illegal. We will also look at common misconceptions about the law and how those may affect the actions and attitudes of the public. We will focus on effective approaches to marijuana investigations, including good interview techniques and the articulation of observations to further marijuana cases. We will examine the problem of driving under the influence of marijuana and what can be done to better identify and document this kind of impairment. Sections in this training include possession and use, adult use cultivation, search and seizure, interview and investigation, impaired driving, and some insights from our subject matter experts on policing the business. This course is designed to be facilitated in a group setting. Before conducting a group training session, you should review and become familiar with the material in this program. Open and print the facilitator guide and go through the program yourself before putting the course on for others. As the facilitator, your job is to engage your students in constructive, free-flowing discussion on the key learning points of this training topic. Use the tools provided in this program to stimulate critical thinking and situational awareness in the group by viewing the scenarios, expert interviews, and discussion videos. Questions and activities are provided to promote group interaction and discussion on the training topic. Customize the learning experience by applying your agency policy and procedures to the training concepts. Segments in this program accommodate shorter training periods, such as during roll call training sessions. Track your students' progress through the entire program. As the facilitator, you need to know that your students have gone through the material and sufficiently mastered the learning objectives. Once the students have successfully completed the program, submit your training roster to POST for CPT credit. Following this plan will help to create an environment for the debate of ideas, sharing of wisdom based on experience, and encourage a greater understanding of local policies and procedures. We wish you and your agency all the best in successfully implementing this program. This course is designed to be facilitated in a group setting. However, when that is not possible, here are some instructions for getting the most out of this training program so that you may receive continuing professional training or CPT credit. Obtain permission from your agency trainer or supervisor to view the course for training credit, and let them know you will be viewing the program. This will give them some time to review the course themselves and be prepared to discuss it with you later on. Open and print the student study guide so that you can take notes and fill out responses to the questions and activities. Think about how the training concepts presented apply to your agency policy and procedures. You may view the scenarios, expert interviews, and discussion videos several times to assist you in providing responses. Keep track of your progress as you complete the segments in this course. When you have finished the entire program, inform the trainer that you would like to review the course with them. Send them your completed student study guide prior to meetings so that they have had a chance to review your responses. Scheduling a face-to-face meeting with your trainer is the best way to review your work on the course. If this is not possible, arrange a phone call meeting. But in either case, allow time to review and discuss your responses. Your supervisor or trainer may require additional work or feedback from you before giving CPT credit. They may want to evaluate your understanding of how the training points relate to your agency policy, for instance. It is their discretion in determining whether you have adequately completed the course. Following these instructions will give you the best opportunity not only to receive CPT credit, but to grasp the training concepts, benefit from the experience of others, and apply the training and experience to your local policy and procedures. We wish you and your agency all the best in successfully completing this course. While regulations for the commercial sale of marijuana are still taking shape, we know that the business of marijuana will continue to operate in our patrol areas in all forms, be it legal or illicit. We need to continue to investigate the businesses associated with marijuana, determine their legality, and enforce the laws that regulate their operations.
Since the late 1990s, we've had medical marijuana, and the cartels have continued to be involved in it. They're regularly arrested, doing everything from the cultivation to the transportation and feeding that marijuana industry.
As of January 1st, 2018, the state will issue cultivation, manufacturing, distribution, retail, and testing laboratory licenses. However, the state cannot issue a license if doing so violates local ordinances or regulations.
Officers are still going to need to establish whether it's a lawful retail establishment, much like they would doing a bar check and checking an ABC license. Officers are going to need to be very aware of those local ordinances and be ready to regulate those, do a business check, and make sure that they fall within the confines of Proposition 64. If they don't fall within those confines, sales of marijuana is still going to be unlawful, as per Health and Safety Code of Section 11359.
When you deal with BHO labs or butane honey oil labs, it's a very high risk situation. It has to be signed off by the fire department. It has to be signed off by the county. So they're putting a lot of risk on these individuals. But under certain circumstances, if an individual is readily available to invest that kind of money into the infrastructure to create that type of system that would be signed off on by the fire company, it would be legal under that circumstance.
However, they're not properly licensed and they're operating as a BHO lab, it's still going to be a felony under 11379.6A of the Health and Safety Code.
And I've actually met officers who said that they tried to enter and were turned away by security. What I would tell officers is, first and foremost, the law is on your side. If they are operating a public business, you are allowed to go in and inspect the business. Even under the new Prop 64, it's spelled out in Prop 64 that you have a right to go in and inspect the business. So don't allow yourself to be turned away.
Ask to see any sort of records they have in regards to sales records or business establishment records. Through Proposition 64, individuals that are working at these marijuana businesses must provide, upon request, this paperwork to law enforcement to be able to investigate.
You should go in to familiarize yourself with the layout because, again, these places get robbed, they get burglarized, and for an officer safety point of view, if nothing else, you need to know what's going on in the interior. One word of caution, you will be videotaped inside. Many dispensaries have hidden entrances and exits, again, because they're worried about being robbed.
With marijuana retail establishments having to deal in exclusively cash crops, there's large amounts of cash on hand, and we're seeing in Colorado they're having a rash of those dispensaries and retail sales outlets targeted for armed robberies.
And look out for this stuff because it's going to be there. And if you're not on board with looking for it, you're going to miss out on things that could potentially save the lives of the public or one of your beat partners. So this is something to look out. It's going to be everywhere. So get the education. If you're not sure, you can talk to somebody, find out where there's a class, and help yourself out, educate yourself. That's the best tool that you can have, is to educate yourself.
Your department has policy about this, and you need to make sure that you know your department policy. You also need to know your local jurisdiction's rules and regulations. Throughout the state of California, they vary from the very conservative, hey, we're not going to allow much of anything, to the very liberal, we're going to allow everything. Regardless of where you police, regardless of where your sphere of control is, you need to know what those laws are, what those policies are, and you need to follow them. Otherwise, we're going to have bad case law.
Today, Miranda is woven into the very fabric of the interrogation process. The same can be said for policing in the era of legal, recreational, and medical marijuana. With a little knowledge, some investigative skills, and detailed documentation, officers can do as good a job as ever protecting the public through effective enforcement of marijuana laws. On behalf of the Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training, we'd like to thank you for watching this program.
we're protectors of the community, and as a protector of the community, we need to make sure that we understand what exactly are the laws.
What we did with Prop 64 was we put age limits. We decriminalized the use of marijuana, and then we added age limits to the specific sections that we have in our laws.
Society has said people can use marijuana, so they're going to use marijuana. But society has also said you can use marijuana within these parameters.
For officers, if we're not familiar with what those are, then how can we be expected to do our job in the right way? So if we educate ourselves, we won't be intimidated, and we can provide that education to the public if they don't understand.
So with the new law and the new passage, we're going to see, in my opinion, new case law follow. It's consistent in law enforcement, and like anything else, it's going to be very important for officers to keep up with current case law, specifically as it applies to marijuana.
As public perceptions and attitudes change, officers will be encountering more day-to-day situations where recreational marijuana is a factor. How well you respond to these situations will be directly impacted by your knowledge of what the law says about who can use it, where they can use it, and how much they can have.
Hey, partner, let's check this skate park out. Kid last week was tearing it up. Sounds good to me. Check this out. Leave this guy? Not on Charles 9 out, one at Parrot Park. Hey, mind if I talk to you for a second?
Sure.
Is that weed?
Yeah, bro, but it's legal now, right?
Yeah, you mind putting it out? The smell bothers me.
Sure. Sorry about that. Can I go now?
Okay, so what do you guys think about this stop? How would you handle this?
I guess it depends on how old he is.
Okay, so that's a good question. I mean, why are we asking how old he is? What do you think?
If you're over the age of 21, it's legal, but it's only legal at home. You still can't smoke it in public. And if they're under 18 or under the age of 21, they can't smoke it at all.
Okay, so let's take this as if he's 17. How would you handle the contact?
In reality, I'd probably confiscate the marijuana and call their parents and make sure the parents showed up to wherever we were at and talk to the parents about the perils of smoking marijuana.
Okay. What would you cite him out for if we cited him out?
If it was the first time I've ever seen him or we've had any dealings with him, I probably wouldn't cite him out and give him a warning, as it's just an infraction anyways.
Okay.
If it's the second time or more, that'd be different.
Okay. So let's flip the scenario a little bit. Now the guy's 22 and we contact him. How are we going to handle that? What do you think?
It's only the violation for being in public then. He can have it. It's not contraband.
So what would be some of the questions that we ask him as far as to figure out where we're going with this?
They just think, how old are you? That's the main thing.
How old is he? Maybe we want to ask him, does he have any more?
Yeah, how much? How much do you have?
Are we going to take into effect, counsel him where we're at? Like if there's other people around, some kids? Is that going to go?
Yeah, I'd
he's
counsel
in a
him.
public park. You got other kids that are in there.
Okay.
I think that another thing that should be brought up too is the guy was right when he said, I thought marijuana was legal. A lot of people don't understand what the actual law states now. And I feel a lot of the times on the street lately, I've had to educate the public and tell them, no, it's actually not legal for you to smoke it on the street if you're over the age of 18, because that's what a lot of people think.
And in this scenario, that's what we're looking at is he's in public, correct?
Mhm.
Correct. So would you search him in this instance?
Honestly, probably not.
I wouldn't.
You wouldn't? Why is it? What do you take into consideration there?
Well, if it's legal, just like if he has alcohol or anything else, you're not going to go and search him because he has that open container for more open containers. He has marijuana. If you can, he's allowed to have up to an ounce of marijuana. That's quite a bit. So you'd be able to see that bulge or anything on his persons. So I wouldn't search him.
So then, taking into effect that what our policy is and what we would do, what do you think the DA would do on this?
Not file.
Yeah.
Our DA
In all
at this time
reality.
is not going to file. In reality, it's just, it's not worth it. It's an infraction ticket that's usually going to go to traffic court now.
So the biggest thing to do is make sure we're acting within our own department policy in this.
Correct.
And then depends what the DA wants to do further than that.
Education.
Okay, guys, so with the video we just watched, with the new changes in Prop 64 that came down, we need to go over the age limits and the new codes that we'd cite these people out for. So if we're looking at the person who's underage, under 18, we're going to be looking at 1157A1 because they can't possess it at all. Then if you're going to go to the next age range, if we're looking at 18 to 20, is anybody, we're going to bump that up to the next charge? You know that, Brittany?
11357A2 for 18 to 20.
Right. And that's gonna go with either the possession or the smoking issue. So then we're gonna go to the next age range where we're gonna be over 21, because that last one covers from 18 until the day before you turn 21. So now we go to over 21. We're now legal to possess, right? So they can have up to, how much could they have?
Up to an ounce.
So then if they're in public and they're smoking, let's say we contact this person at a bar where you can smoke on the back patio, but they happen to be smoking marijuana instead of just a cigarette. What are we going to look at citing them for that?
That'd be the new charge of 11362.3.
A1.
A1.
11362.3A1. And that's going to be in for your generally non-prohibited places.
Okay.
Now, if you go into that same bar and it's posted everywhere, prohibited no smoking, then that's a different charge. And what would you be looking at then?
In a prohibited area?
It's in a prohibited area. You're over 21. So you generally couldn't smoke a cigarette in that same place, no matter what. So now we're going to bump it up to the A2 section, 11362.3A2. That's over 21 in a prohibited place to begin with. So we need to focus on that, make sure we stay with our own policies, and realize the 3 different age groups that we're dealing with now, and also if we're in a prohibited or non-prohibited place. So if we have to deal with this out there.
Are we taking the marijuana from every category or just from the?
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. I mean, if they're underage, should we take the marijuana at that place?
Yes.
Why? Why would you think?
Well, they shouldn't. They can't have it in the first place. So we take it back and look at it.
So they're prohibited to begin with.
That's correct.
So if we give the marijuana back to them, then they'd still be in violation. So we'd take it. And of course, we're going to stick by our own department policy on that. So then the person's overage, over 21. It's legal for them to have it to begin with. They just happen to be in public. So would you take it then?
No.
Probably not.
No.
Okay. So we'd cite them out and then give it back to them. That sound good for everybody?
Yeah.
Brittany, you agree with that?
Yes, sir.
I think we can go 10-8 here. We can have a good day and be safe.
Cool.
Thanks, Sarge.
We're going to need to educate the public. We're going to need to make these contacts. And officers need to know that there's very small parameters where the possession is legal. It's very dependent upon age, quantity, where it's possessed, where it's grown. So when encountering somebody that's possessing marijuana, using marijuana, growing marijuana, under the influence of marijuana, there's still a large area where that's unlawful and not allowed.
Unlawful marijuana possession is covered under Section 11357 of the Health and Safety Code. It is important to note that possession of any amount of recreational marijuana is unlawful by persons under the age of 21. A person under the age of 18 who is in possession of recreational marijuana is guilty of an infraction and will be required to attend drug education or counseling and perform community service. For a person 18 through 20 years of age, the severity of the offense varies depending on the amount of recreational marijuana. Possessing less than 1 ounce or 4 grams of concentrated cannabis is an infraction. Possession of amounts greater than these increases the offense to a misdemeanor. Possessing marijuana on school grounds is a little bit of a different story. A person who is 18 years of age or over on school grounds with less than 1 ounce or 4 grams of concentrated cannabis faces a misdemeanor. Possession of amounts greater than these allows for stiffer misdemeanor penalties. Even if a person is meeting the conditions of lawful possession, officers may encounter more situations where people could be using marijuana in a manner that is unlawful.
Your typical California resident thinks, well, it's all legal now, which means I can use it everywhere.
So you're going to see a less of medical marijuana and more of just straight adult use marijuana.
So we're going to encounter those citizens that feel that because Proposition 64 is passed, that they're free to smoke it anywhere. And it's important to know that it's not, because it still exposes others to the chemicals, to the byproducts, just like a cigarette would.
We restrict the use of tobacco to a large degree. We also restrict the use of marijuana. It's not to be smoked publicly. So people may misunderstand it, may misconstrue the law and think that they're doing nothing wrong.
If he's over the age of 21 and the fact that he is using in public, that is another crime and a specific section associated with that as well. The new section for that is California Health and Safety Code section 11.362.3, parentheses little a, parentheses 1. It is a crime in the state of California, if you're over the age of 21, to smoke recreational marijuana in public.
The marijuana enforcement laws found in Health and Safety Code sections 11.357 through 11.360 are still on the books. However, there have been changes made based upon age, quantities, etc. Officers need to take into consideration local laws and ordinances and the age of the user. Many people think that if you're just over 18, you're an adult, and that you're free to use, and that's a misconception. In fact, you have to be over 21. So it's going to be important to establish the age of the person you're contacting right away.
Get his ID. Find out his ID, find out his information, see what his age. If he's, under 18 years old, then you can get the parents involved. You can do a lot of different things at that point. But I think that's where you need to start, and just not, it's okay. Between the age of 18 and 21 is where you kind of get into where it's not legal. Okay, they have to be under the adult use. It has to be 21 and older. 18 to 21, you have violations. So if they're under 21 but above 18 and they possess less than an ounce, then it's an infraction. It's a $100 fine. If they possess more than an ounce, then you have a misdemeanor. And then individuals below 18, no matter what quantity is, it's going to be unlawful, and they're going to have to go through a drug treatment program, et cetera. So it's one of those you don't want to just walk away. You have to ask the right questions and figure out where they fit in that scale.
If he's over the age of 21, he may receive a ticket for the public smoking of marijuana. Depending on your department policy and how you want to handle this, he may be able to keep, if you want, keep his marijuana joint, because technically he's over the age of 21 and he's allowed to keep that. If he's under the age of 21, under the age of 18, then you go ahead and seize the contraband and book it in as evidence.
Officers in regular contact with the public will have a role in affecting attitudes regarding the level of permissibility of recreational marijuana use. More than just moments of enforcement, these contacts are an opportunity to educate the public on the laws and local regulations regarding the use of recreational marijuana. Coming up in the next section, we will look at another common situation where officers may encounter marijuana in their day-to-day calls.
It's important for officers when enforcing any law, especially marijuana laws, to make sure that they fall within compliance of their departmental guidelines, local laws and ordinances, and with what's allowed in their jurisdictions when enforcing these new laws.
Regardless of your feelings for legalization, not legalization is here, but we need to make sure as law enforcement officers, as our profession, that we're keeping society safe. And in order to do that, we have to know influence, we have to know the laws, we have to apply them fairly, and we have to apply them. We can't just ignore them.
As officers come across marijuana on routine calls, it is our job to determine the legality of each situation. Whether or not that determination results in a level of enforcement, we should also consider our responsibility with the community to provide information on some of the less apparent risks associated with marijuana.
91 Charles 9, can you send me the burglary report call in Yarborough Way?
91 Charles 9, I'll show you en route. Details to your MDT.
Morning, ma'am. Deputy Green. You reported a burglary?
Yes, thanks so much for coming out, Deputy. Someone broke the lock on my gate, and then they broke into my shed and they stole my lawnmower.
Sorry to hear that happen. Can you show me the lock?
Oh yeah, sure. Follow me.
When did this happen?
Well, I took my kids to school, and when I got home, I noticed that the gate was open. So I went into the backyard and I saw that my lawnmower was missing. I didn't want to touch anything, so I just left it like it was and I called you guys.
Can you show me where the shed is?
Yeah.
Why do you have marijuana growing in your backyard?
Oh, those are just my husband's plants. They didn't touch those though.
Why do you have marijuana growing in your backyard?
Oh, those are just my husband's plants. They didn't touch those though.
Okay, so changes in Prop 64. First thing we're looking at is we're there for a residential theft, burglary type case, right? Is this do we need a search warrant to go back in there for this? Is this something that we are invited for? What kind of search is this?
Plainview, she invited you back there.
Plainview consent.
There for a lawful reason.
Invited you to come back there for a lawful reason.
We think we're going to get this a lot. We're showing up to regular calls. We're going to come across a lot of grows. So what are some things that we want to keep in mind if we're coming across that, especially how'd you come across this marijuana grow? Was it really a secure grow?
No.
No. So we're looking, what would we be looking for in this instance if you come across a grow that is unsecure in the backyard that children have access to? What do you think, Brittany?
We'd articulate ease of access, proximity to the residence, proximity to maybe the kids' toys, whatever you're observing in that area.
Right, so kids' toys.
What the age of the kids are. I mean, teenagers, they're going to access it. And, I mean, are you allowing that access to underage because you know it?
Right.
And the other things that go along with a grow. Where's the fertilizer? Where's the chemicals?
Right.
Do the kids have access to that?
So let's look at that a little bit. Is there a difference in chemicals that we're going to use in the grow also?
Yes.
So there'd be what? Organic and the other chemicals and stuff that people get in?
Chemical.
Right. So chemicals laying around like that might constitute something more of just marijuana access that for child endangerment we're looking at? Maybe we can start articulating.
But you have to look at the totality of the situation. You're not
Right.
going to go in a backyard that has other poisonous plants if a child eats and
Right.
arrest a parent because they have poisonous plants that if you eat poinsettias are dangerous for animals and in humans. We're not going
Right.
to arrest parents because they grow poinsettias. So you have to take the totality of the situation. Are they allowing their children to go out there? All those things would come
Right.
into play.
So those would be the questions that we're going to ask, right? Is, where are your kids at? How do they have access to that? Maybe how do you keep them away from it? Where's the lock and key supposed to be on this?
And city ordinances as well. Some of them,
Can't
each
you
city
even
is
have the
different.
grow outside at all?
Right.
Each city is different in the state of California, where some cities allow you to grow outside and some don't. So we have to know those rules and regulations as well.
So we got to start with our department policy.
Correct.
Then we're going to look at some ordinances, and we're going to consult with our local district attorney, figure that out, right? And then so even there, we can kind of go further into that is what type of grower do we have? What do you think would be a good thing to ask the person as far as what level of grow sophistication they would have?
How long have you been growing?
Right.
How did you, learn the techniques?
Why would that matter?
It's going to give you an idea as to how long they've actually been at it, their level of proficiency,
their yield.
Their yield.
Maybe how much they're going to lose out of the crop or what they're looking at.
Yeah.
It looks like it's planted with their vegetable garden, and part of the way they did it looks like it's part of their landscaping.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're looking at that. I mean, what would be the dangers we're looking at for children? Even taken apart from CPS or anything, we're doing our job. We're there. So what are the dangers we want to look at and see if it needs to go to that extra level of investigation? What are we worried about with the children?
Them eating the buds.
The access. So what's the problem with access to marijuana? What are they going to do?
Well, they eat it or take it and sell it or use it, depending on the age of the child.
Okay. And what's something else? I mean, with the grows that we have in the backyards that we're looking at as law enforcement, what do you think we're going to start having to respond to?
Thefts.
People still, that's...
You have a theft that already occurred, and what do we know as officers? once a thief comes into the place and sees something, what's going to happen?
They're gonna tell their friends, hey, they have a grow in their backyard.
Right.
2 more months are going to be mature, so 2 more months from now we should hit that house to take
Maybe
their
they were really
plants.
just looking for a lawnmower that day, but their friend down the street isn't. So hey, you might want to go hit this place.
And would that be something we talk to the homeowner, like, hey, just so you know now, people know that you have marijuana in your backyard. We should take some steps to change that. If you're
My
doing it
opinion
legally.
is we're there. They're being legal. I mean, we have nothing else. Say we don't have anything else to push it. Are we not wanting to do our job also to protect that person and say, hey, you might want to take this in consideration?
So I'm saying we tell the homeowner, like, hey, maybe we should move it inside or do something, because now you have other people that know you have marijuana.
Because overall, what's that going to do for us as law enforcement?
Saves us paper.
Back. Saves us from going back. It's going to make our job easier, right? So we have less calls for service. We can do different
And
things.
it's good relations with the community if the officer knows the law, that can talk to the person and the homeowner and say, hey, I understand this law is in effect and you have marijuana and you're in compliance, if they are in compliance, and I just want you to be safe about how you're doing it. So it's like a win-win for all of us.
Right. Okay, so in this video, we're looking at recreational. Let's stay on that path here. We go back there and we saw 6 plants in here. So what is the law for recreational if you're at your house? How many plants do you think you can have?
6 per person. 6 per adult.
6? Do we think that's per person, per household?
I have no idea. That's why I asked the question. Was it?
It's probably per person.
6 per person, or is it per household?
It's got to be per person.
Okay, so it's defined in 11362.2A3. It's per household. You can have the 6 plants there. And what's another thing that might limit where this grow could be, depending if it could be an outdoor grow or not?
City ordinances.
City policy.
City ordinance.
Local city ordinances. So let's kind of further this a little bit, and we go down and we look in that shed that was broken into, and you find some marijuana in there. What are we looking at now? Can they have that there? What do we think, Brittany?
Well, I mean, if they're over their plant count, then no.
So we're looking at just bud as far as the harvest,
Harvest
from
of
plants.
it. Okay.
What are we looking at there? What do you think?
Yeah, I don't see why not. I mean, if they're harvesting their plant.
So they're allowed to have the harvest from the plants. They're not allowed to have more plants, but they're allowed to have that harvest from there. So as long as it stays at home, they're not allowed to transport it around.
Is there a maximum weight limit that they can have? Is it ounces?
As long
pounds?
as it's the harvest
Just the
yield
harvest.
from that grow, then no. That's what they can have.
So can they save it up and have like 3 or 4 harvests and then keep that? Because they
As
only
long as
smoke
it's-
weed on special occasions.
As long as it's from that grow and it's from their own personal, and it's kept in a safe, secure location at home, they can't transport it all. We're still looking at recreational. You can only transport the ounce that you have on you.
And if it's in a locked shed, then that would be completely legal, and then the child endangerment would go away,
Right.
as it's in a locked, secure area.
Right. So what might we want to educate the homeowner on?
Have a more secure locked area.
To fix the lock now? Because
Yes.
now it's unsecure. So that's where we need to go. And what are we going to prevent those issues also? What are we looking at? So why
Future-
it has to be secure.
Future problems.
Future break-ins, safety of the people around.
Right. So we also need to protect these people, the citizens that are staying within the laws, and we don't want them to be victims of these crimes later, right? So, okay, so that's good. Let's take a 5-minute break and come back for the next segment.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
On its face, this appears to be a lawful grow. However, officers need to be aware of their local policies. The 11362 also allows local jurisdictions to put tighter regulations. For instance, your local jurisdiction may say that the 6 plants that can lawfully be grown must be grown indoors.
Each county and city has their own different ordinances on what type of conduct they allow. Under different land use acts, some cities and counties will allow cultivation for medical marijuana or a dispensary, and others will not. Certain conduct, no matter what the city allows, is still going to be acting outside.
I know that in Colorado, there was a specific incident where there was a county that said yes, the city said no. So you have the same people growing just outside of city limits in the county.
Officers should consider Health and Safety Code 11362.2 when looking for the restrictions imposed on the growing of marijuana for personal recreational use.
In 11362, we're going to deal with laws that outline, for instance, cultivation in a lawful manner. So while 11362.2 will help guide an officer or a deputy to know if the cultivation that they're dealing with is legal or not, if they deem it to be illegal, they're still going to refer to the original Health and Safety Code 11358 for the enforcement action. The officers are going to need to educate themselves on those changes and just be aware that they're there.
They can't be visible from the street. So the question of what is visible has not been defined specifically, but if it's not visible from the public, sidewalk, et cetera, then they're operating within the current law.
Questions may arise regarding how many plants can be grown per household, how much cultivated marijuana is allowed in that household, and what is the grower allowed to do with the cultivated marijuana.
So in the passage of Proposition 64, a person over the age of 21 can possess up to 1 ounce of marijuana bud, up to 8 grams of concentrated cannabis, and up to 6 marijuana plants.
Now, when you harvest those plants, you can't control if you yield more than an ounce of marijuana. Basically, the way the proposition is laid out, that any amount in excess of 1 ounce of marijuana, you must keep within a locked box or a locked container. It doesn't specify exactly what that is, but it can't be one that is just laying around the house, for example, or you can't carry it with you when you go outside of the house. If you go outside of the house, you're allowed to have an ounce or less of marijuana. So it has to be within a locked area.
There's 6 plants that are allowed per household, not per person. And also, not to be confused, is the proceeds from those plants. So if they have more cannabis stored from that grow, they're allowed to have that as long as it is reasonable that it came from the plants that they're using.
If they give it to their friends for no compensation or for anything of any value back, then they're operating within the law. They just cannot receive anything for value. They can give away up to an ounce of marijuana.
So in this scenario, you may see the deputy continue his investigation and come across a quantity of processed marijuana. Line of questioning in that case might want to establish, did that processed marijuana come from these plants? If that's the case, under 11362.2, that marijuana may be possessed lawfully under parameters established by local jurisdictions, secure area, et cetera.
So, the typical marijuana plant is going to yield anywhere from, maybe a little less than a pound up to 6 pounds. It really depends on the sophistication of the grower.
It's not unusual now for marijuana farmers, to brag about being able to produce anywhere from 4 to as much as 12 pounds of just bud on a outdoor marijuana plant.
Some of the things that need to be considered with these outdoor cultivation grows is that the neighbors and the people in the neighborhood are very aware of this outdoor grow, and word can spread very quickly. And that could lead to nefarious activity. For instance, somebody may decide that they want to come and steal that. We would call that a rip. They may expose themselves to violent crime, a danger of those plants being stolen.
The guy who stole the lawnmower today, I guarantee you, is going to be making a note that, hey, when those plants get a little bit ready for harvest, maybe I'm going to come back. And if I come back, maybe I'm going to come back with a gun.
Some other things encountered on outdoor cultivation and indoor cultivation are very hazardous chemicals. So officers need to be very aware of what they're touching, where they're stepping, where they're standing, because they could easily expose themselves to very toxic chemicals.
Does a person who's a parent or a grower have a responsibility to protect children? If you're a responsible, marijuana grower and you're growing your 6 plants for recreational purposes, you still have an obligation to protect children.
Often, our daily contacts result in non-enforcement situations, which may allow our experience with crime prevention to be shared with members of the public. Perhaps consider that recreational marijuana laws have now added more opportunities to be in position to educate the public on safety. Up next, we will distinguish between the rules for recreational and medical marijuana and discuss the importance of documenting our observations and actions during a contact.
There's lots and lots of empirical data that shows that if society says something is permissible, then more people will do it. And counter to that, if society says something is not permitted or it's looked down on, then people won't do it. We're going to see an evolving, changing perception, I believe, in what marijuana and marijuana influence looks like.
With the passage of Proposition 64, much of what was previously reported by subjects to be for medicinal use may now be claimed as recreational. However, there will still be times when the marijuana won't fit in the recreational category, and subjects will claim it's medicinal marijuana. Knowing the differences in the laws regulating recreational and medical marijuana is going to require both an understanding of the existing laws and an effort to remain current with developing case law. This extra work will benefit you as there will likely be more situations where the legal status of marijuana will come into question.
Okay, guys, so let's talk about this a little bit. When we see the stop, let's start from when the officer leaves her vehicle. She's walking up to that vehicle. What do you think she saw or what happened?
She probably smelled
it, maybe.
the odor of marijuana.
Did you notice when she stopped at the passenger's door?
She
Or
did.
Right
Yeah,
before?
she went like this and-
Okay. Why do we think that's important?
That's how you articulate your reasoning for getting in the car.
Okay,
To show how potent the odor was.
What was that, Jeremy?
I said to show how potent the odor was.
That's a good point, to show how potent the odor was, because I mean, with the new recreational laws, with Prop 64, we can possess up to an ounce. Citizens can.
Can we search
so
a vehicle now just on smell alone because it's not illegal to have marijuana?
It's a very good question. That's what we're going to talk about. Is the opinion here, and as far as our policy-wise, there's two different odors you're going to smell. Is burnt marijuana. You smell the odor of narcotics in there. It's burnt. So we also have some other issues that we're going to look into, right? What would they be?
We'd have the issue of they just smoked it.
Okay. So Brittany, what do you think that would?
So that'd be under driving under the influence.
Okay.
If they're
Driving-
impaired, if there's impairment and they're driving after have just smoked.
Can we think of any other issues that we might have if there's burnt marijuana?
Kids in the car.
So did you see anything else in the car, even
There was a
walking
car
up
seat.
to it?
Yeah.
Saw the car seat. Did we see the stickers on the back of the car?
Yep. Little family stickers.
Okay. So if we just stick a little bit as far as the other codes that we have, we're looking into the child endangerment. But before that, we can also look for an open container, because if you're going to smell burnt marijuana, normally that would be an open container that they just used that we're looking at. What about asking for consent in here? We saw the officer in the video ask for that.
Well, she said no.
You can.
I mean,
Is there
so-
anything that tells us as officers that we can't ask for consent on a traffic stop?
No, I think we should.
No, you should
consent
ask.
should be
Yeah.
for everything.
Okay.
Even if you have a search warrant, I think every officer should still say, "Hey, would you mind if I do this or this?" It's nice to have a warrant backed up by consent as well.
Right.
It's CYA.
Right. The consent would be better to trump the search warrant. What do you think instigated the search for this officer? I mean, why did she push it a little further?
The strongest.
She said it was super strong.
And the
Real
driver
strong.
admitted to having marijuana.
Well, she picked up the first little, baggie and said, "Is this all you have? Basically, is this the marijuana?" And she smells a really strong, potent smell, and
Right.
all she has is that little baggie. So she's going to look further, and she did. And there's the bag with all the rest of the stuff in it.
So Jeremy, how much did the driver say she had?
She said just a little bit.
Grams.
Couple grams, right?
Yeah.
So if we get out of a patrol car and we're walking up to that vehicle, and I smell that marijuana before I'm stepping out of my vehicle, do we think that's a little bit more than just a couple grams,
More
maybe?
than a couple grams.
Right. Well, first she only said she had a couple grams, right?
Mm-hmm.
She didn't tell you about the bag behind her, right? Then you pull that bag out. What does the officer start pulling out of that bag?
Well, look like a notebook, so like payo sheets.
Multiple
Possible
bags.
pails.
Separate bags, separate
Packaging.
containers.
Okay.
Then you had
What kind of bags were they?
Ziploc bags.
Plastic
Ziploc?
And then
Ziplocs.
there were also the doctor script stickers
Right.
on a roll. If
Okay.
you're in a legitimate business, I'm going to do that prior to coming to just
What was
drop
the-
your stuff off.
Exactly. So then what was the other thing that was there on the hood that the officer pulled out? That's probably big in this case. I don't think anybody said it yet. Had a digital scale sitting there. Anybody notice that?
Oh, yeah.
So I've got multiple bags of marijuana. They didn't tell you about it at first. It doesn't match up with the packaging. And I got possible payos, and I got a digital scale. So then we need to delve into the line of questioning of what we're going to ask that person, because it's going to change now. We're not just on the regular traffic stop at this point. Now we're looking at possibly possession for sales. So what are some type of questions that you might ask this person?
Well, if it's not yours, whose is it? Why do you have it? How did it get into your bag? You can carry on down that line of questioning for, till you at least get some response from her.
Okay.
Whether the explanation is valid or not.
We want to lock her into that statement.
You want
right?
to lock her in.
So we're going to lock her into that initial statement, which you've already done. Is she said, okay, I only got a couple grams in this. Well, she already messed that up a little bit because there's a bag in the back, right? Pulled out multiple baggies. Now we're going to lock her into, okay, well, these are my patients.
I want to know where she got the marijuana. Is she growing it at her house? Is
There you
she
go.
buying it from somebody? Where are you taking it specifically?
does she have her kids
Do you
around at home?
Yeah, do you have kids at home where you're growing this? I'm not saying it's illegal to grow it at home.
Right.
But
why would
I
we be asking those questions then?
I want to know if has an illegal grow at her home and she's actually selling it for profit.
This traffic stop might evolve into a couple search warrants.
Correct.
Something like that. So we now have her locked in these statements, which could end up from something that could have been recreational unannounced to now we're going to move it into multiple search warrants into felonies. And good felonies that could be prosecuted very well if we get back to articulating everything from step one that we see and smell in our reports. Lock her into whatever she's going to tell you.
I probably would have locked her in at the beginning on more of a general, do you use it just because it's legal and you can now? Versus giving her the out of the medical right off the bat. And if she's like, yeah, I smoke it because I can. Okay, the medical whole is now out the window.
There you go.
We don't even have to justify that.
Right. So you're locking her into whatever she wants to tell you at that point. And we got to the point where she said she had a couple grams in the car, right? Yeah. So we went past that a little bit. Now she's claiming the marijuana that we found, and past that, she's a caregiver. So what's the definition of a caregiver at that point? Primary caregiver. What's allowed for People versus Mensch, 2008. Jeremy, do you remember that one?
Don't.
No.
I have to look it
I'll
up.
say it's 8 ounces, isn't it? 8 ounces.
We're talking about what a primary caregiver is and what they have to do.
They have
So
to take care of
basically,
somebody.
I'm sure she has to have records and stuff.
So the basics of it is somebody allowed just to provide marijuana to somebody as caregiver?
No.
So what do they have to do?
They had to provide life-giving functions for them, take them to the doctor, feed them, bathe them, care for them, know what their medical conditions are.
Right. So we're talking more like hospice, like actual caregiver, somebody that actually knows.
Not just the delivery person.
Providing marijuana.
What line of questioning we're looking at then? If she's now saying, well, I'm a caregiver for them, they're my patients.
Ask her like their names, what their medical condition is.
Now, as far
If she has any paperwork.
So let's focus on just the names of the people and say she does have the paperwork and she pulls that out, and the first person you look at, what are some good questions if you got that paperwork there to ask her?
I said ask her like what their condition is, what they're using it for.
Maybe what they're using it for.
They have to tell you because it's like
Who's their doctor?
Probably not.
How often do you take them to the doctor?
Who's their doctor? How often do you take them?
How long have you been providing care?
Maybe what their name is. Start with that. They may not know them.
I mean,
how much they actually use per day.
Yeah. So this person should have a general relationship almost with this person where they know them as much as like a doctor would with you, right?
Yes.
That's what we're looking at. Not just somebody that's going to transport marijuana from A to B and say, okay, here you go, I'm your caregiver. That we're looking at. Okay, I think that's it for this one. Let's take a 5-minute break and come back and we'll do the next one. Ruby? I think that was it.
When all is said and done, it's the exact same marijuana. It's just different laws and regulations that govern each.
It's up to the law enforcement officer to know the differences and to realize that there's two paths. There's recreational and there is medical.
Included in Section 11362.1 of the Health and Safety Code are the amounts and forms of marijuana that are now lawful for those who are 21 and over to possess. It also specifies that marijuana involved in any way with conduct deemed lawful cannot be the basis for detention, search, or arrest.
I think gone are the days of us just saying, well, why did you search the car? And our answer being, because I smelt weed. We need to add a little bit more to that now. 11362.1 parentheses little c that discusses search and seizure of marijuana, basically saying if marijuana is possessed legally, it's not considered contraband or probable cause for a search. So the question becomes, what is legally possessed and what is illicit?
You didn't just search the car because you smelled marijuana. That's an ambiguous statement, and it won't fly anymore. But you could detain and search because there was an overwhelming odor that was inconsistent with the amount that the person was claiming to legally possess.
What other articulable facts do you have presented to you at that time that would sure up your investigation? We'd like to call that a +1, the overwhelming odor of marijuana, plus loose marijuana in the car. Because of Proposition 64, any marijuana that is being transported must be in a closed container. Loose marijuana would be in an open container, therefore giving you probable cause to search the car.
A +1, I believe, can also be inconsistencies with what you're observing. In that particular scenario, we have a person who claims and has in plain sight basically about a gram or so of marijuana bud. but the officer is detecting an overwhelming odor. In fact, a significant enough odor that it's inconsistent with that small amount of marijuana that's visible and the person is claiming. Part of what can also justify a search is the person is lying to you. Well, as an experienced officer, you have someone claiming legal recreational marijuana, a gram. There's an overwhelming smell. It's not consistent with that. That would lead me as an experienced officer to say, oh, this person's lying to me.
I think every officer taking a couple extra minutes, 3 or 4 extra sentences on the report can sure up that articulation. The overwhelming odor so strong that I had to jerk my head back. It was so extremely pungent. I noticed loose marijuana on the floorboard. There was a little kid in the back. I could smell the odor of burnt marijuana emanating from the vehicle. The guy had a joint behind his ear. There was a sandwich baggie of marijuana that was open, or a canister that had marijuana that was opened. So these things here help sure up our probable cause to conduct our investigation in a more thorough manner as we move forward.
Let's be very careful about exercising searches as to marijuana. And in an abundance of caution, I believe that we will get good case law, which will ultimately support our mission of protecting the community.
The medicinal marijuana still falls under the parameters of the compassionate use and Proposition 215 guidelines. So while the 2 grams or the small quantity may be possessed legally recreationally, the medicinal marijuana may be possessed illegally for sale under the guise of a medicinal marijuana possession.
In determining the validity of a subject's claim of being a caregiver for medical marijuana patients, officers can rely on the definitions of a primary caregiver that are established in the 2008 People v. Mensch case.
We actually have some really good case law, including People v. Mensch, which says that a primary caregiver actually has to be a primary caregiver. They can't just be a weed supplier.
The act of primary caregiving has already had to occurred before marijuana comes into play.
And he or she basically said, I'm a primary caregiver. Now let's see what kind of holes we can poke in that by asking the right questions. Questions being, what do you provide other than marijuana? Do you provide any other services? Who are some of your patients? Call those individuals. If she gives you 10 patients, call them. Do you know this particular individual? What does she do for you? She provides marijuana. Does she do anything else for you? But on a very conversational level, non-threatening, because I think that's where you'll get your most dialogue.
Ask her, okay, your first primary caregiver designation is for, John Doe. Okay, where does John Doe live? Do you meet John Doe at John Doe's house? How many times have you been to John Doe's house? When you're at John Doe's house, how many times have you taken John Doe to the doctor? How many times have you helped John Doe get dressed? How many times have you prepared a meal for John Doe? How many times have you cleaned John Doe's house or apartment? But as you vet all that out, what you find is that the person has never assumed primary care for the individual. Now, one thing I also do encourage is that conversation should be audio recorded or video recorded, because you want to be able to have that as, that's the best evidence, is not just your word against their word, but an actual audio recording or a video recording.
She claims to be a caregiver, but as the officer unpacks the bag, you see multiple packaging, digital scales, payo sheets indicating that she possibly has multiple clients. And if a true caregiver were delivering medication from a pharmacy to a patient, the medication's already going to be doled out in its dose, or maybe in a bottle that they would have to take one of the pills, for instance. But they're not going to be weighing out the product, putting it into smaller baggies, packaging it. You'll also notice that there are a roll of labels that are going to later probably be affixed to this packaging to make it look like it's possessed medicinally. But those are some of the indicators you'll see. Medicinal users will typically package it or possess it in a manner that tries to emulate a medicine.
That's got to make its way into the report. Those articulable facts bring the totality of the circumstances to justify the detention and the search and the narcotics investigation.
Now, more than ever, detailed facts articulated in a report and describing the totality of the circumstances that justify your actions are critical in cases where marijuana is involved. Our next section will focus on effective interview techniques as part of a marijuana grow investigation.
I'm aware of people in the marijuana industry who are not even thinking twice about investing in real estate, purchasing houses for $500,000, $600,000, $700,000, investing hundreds of thousands of dollars in grow equipment. And the reason they do that is because the return on their investment is in the millions.
When you discuss with these people that are cultivating certain things, we want to make sure that we have a decent enough understanding of what the medical marijuana laws are in relation to reasonableness for us to investigate this cultivation, this possession, this transportation, whatever it may be, to determine if it's within compliance with the law.
The use of marijuana for medicinal reasons has been lawful in the state since the 1996 passage of Proposition 215, otherwise known as the Compassionate Use Act. Even still, many who claim to be legally growing medical marijuana are using these laws as a guise for extremely profitable businesses. By developing some specific interview techniques related to the medical marijuana laws, officers can dig deep enough to get a foothold for a case to be built and shut down these often dangerous operations.
Hi, ma'am. Did you call the police?
I'm tired of my neighbors constantly smoking marijuana. My kids have to smell that stinky odor. It's disgusting. And if it weren't bad enough that they're smoking it, they're growing it too.
Okay. Which house are you talking about?
Right here.
Okay. And you said that they're smoking marijuana. Have you actually seen them personally smoke it, or are you just smelling the odor of marijuana?
They're smoking in the front yard, backyard. They're smoking all the time.
Okay. And you mentioned that they were growing it as well. Have you actually personally seen them growing the plants?
He showed them to me.
Okay. How do you know it was marijuana?
I know what marijuana looks like.
Okay. And where were they at when you saw them?
In his garage.
Okay. About how many do you think he had?
A lot.
Okay. We'll go talk to them, and then we'll come back and talk to you afterwards.
Okay.
Okay, here, honey. Sounds like fans.
Yeah, it smells like marijuana too. I'll make contact at the front door. Hey, sir, how you doing? It's Officer Lopez from the River City Police Department. Hey, we got a report that you're possibly growing marijuana inside your residence. Are you by chance a medical marijuana patient?
Yes, sir. I am.
Okay. And do you cultivate your own medicine inside your residence?
Yes. I have a small marijuana grow here.
Okay. With your permission, if it's okay with you, we'd like to come take a look at the grow.
Sure. Yeah, I'd be more than happy to show you. Follow
Okay.
me.
Is there anybody else inside the residence?
No, it's just me.
Okay, thank you. Oh, these are some nice plants you got here. How many do you think you have?
I would guess about 100.
Okay. If you don't mind me asking, do you happen to have your medical marijuana recommendation from your doctor?
Sure, got it right here.
Thank you, sir. It's a little bit hard to read your doctor's name. Do you by chance remember your doctor's name offhand?
I don't know. It's on the recommendation.
Do you mind if I ask you a couple questions regarding this?
No, sure, no problem. Go ahead.
Do you have a medical condition that requires you to use medical marijuana?
Yes, I have a bad back. Tweaked it a few years ago playing softball. Sucks getting old, you know.
About how much medicine do you think you use a day?
I'd say about 2 grams a day.
Okay. How do you typically use it?
I smoke it in a pipe.
Gotcha. How long do you think you feel the effects usually?
I would venture to say about 3 hours or so.
Okay. Is there a time of day that you typically use?
First thing in the morning.
Okay. Are all these plants just for personal use?
Yes, it's all for me.
Okay. How much marijuana do you expect to harvest from this crop?
I'd say 6, maybe 8 ounces per plant.
All right. Do you have any other questions, partner?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I do. How many crops a year do you expect to harvest?
Oh, geez, I could harvest at least 5 a year.
What are we thinking on this? What do you guys, how everything was going?
It's probably a little more than personal use.
Yeah, the math doesn't
If he
work.
smoked all day, maybe.
Was this guy cooperative?
Yeah.
Do you want to show us the grow?
The officer did a great job on the questions. Like, I didn't even think to ask some of those questions, and I'm like, oh, that's a great question.
Right. He said, okay, well, who's your doctor, you know? And he had the document in his hand. Do you really think that officer wasn't able to read that because it was blurry?
No, I think he's confirming whether or not he actually knows who his recommendation is from
Why would you do that?
to determine the validity of it and if he's really a patient.
Okay. So what'd be the next question that was asked in here? The next step?
His injury?
What's the recommendation for?
What they're using it for, right? Maybe when do you use it? Start into how much, like, do you smoke right when you wake up? You smoke throughout the day? What do you think on those questionings?
Yeah, and he stated that, you know, he wakes and bakes, you know, rolls out of bed, hits the pipe. Yeah, lasts him 3
How long
hours.
does it last?
And why would we want to take into the duration? What do you think? If this person's still got a job or anything, what would we take into consideration of the duration of it and how long they use?
Can only smoke it at home.
You know, what happens if this person's his school bus driver?
Yeah, I was just going to say, what if he's operating a motor vehicle?
Right. So are we looking at different laws then, that maybe we're not looking at the cultivation aspect of it, but we're looking at protecting the community?
Yes.
Maybe we need to educate that person on it so we can save some lives down the road. So maybe we can look into some DMV issues as far as submitting a license or something. We touched on a little bit about the math. Why do we think the math's important in this? What's the reason to start? Now we're going from, we got him locked into, we got 2 grams a day, right? And let's start with what he said he used. So in this scenario, you said you used 2 grams a day. There's 365 days in a year. So 2 times 365 is what?
730.
So we're looking at 730 grams a year. So I want to take that 730, we're going to go up into pounds. So we're looking at how many grams in a pound?
454.
454.
So we're looking at 454 grams per pound. So 730 divided by 454 is what?
1.6.
1.6 pounds.
1.6, right? So we're going to put that up here. It's 1.6 pounds per year. We can go back through. So if we remember what he said on the grow, right? He said 100 plants on the grow. You remember what he said on the yield?
6 to 8, but
6 to 8 ounces per plant.
So we're going to be conservative on that and go down to 3 ounces. So we got 3 ounces per plant. So simple math here, 3 times 100. We're looking at 300 ounces per yield, right? How many cycles? And he said what?
5.
5. So we're still going to be nice to him. Let's give him 3 per year, right? 300 ounces times the 3 a year. So we're looking at what, 900?
900 ounces per year.
So then we're going to go that. We got how many ounces in a pound?
16 ounces in a pound.
So we're going to divide that
by 16.
by 16. What are we coming out with?
It gives us 56.25 pounds.
56.25. So we got this use, got our yield. Right? So now the next important thing we're going to have to do.
So he has 54.65 pounds extra a year.
54.65?
54.65.
So 56.25 minus the 1.6 equals 54 point what?
65.
65. That's excess?
Correct.
We're looking at some issues here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So that's where we now had them locked into the statements. We're doing the math now. Now we're getting into some questions of,
Where's it going? Where's the excess going?
that's the number we're not going to concern
Yeah.
ourselves with. Because even if we double that with him and we don't go conservative, I mean, now we're just getting into the astronomical numbers going up, right?
Right.
But we're going to put that in our report, right, and articulate this as, hey, we are on the low end, even on his low end, we went below that. and this is what we're showing. So then, maybe in our report next, we're going to do, okay, his low end is this, his high end is this.
His low end is double that, almost 100 pounds.
And then we can start getting into different market values of what the excess marijuana is and starting to show what. What are we starting to show with this?
For profit and sales.
Yeah.
For profit, for sales. We're starting to get into different crimes, right?
The other good question to ask that wasn't touched on was, if you look at his setup, he's got carbon dioxide enriching.
Excellent.
How much money did you spend on your setup? How much money did you spend on all your lights and all this stuff?
Right? There's sunk cost into our grow.
And where does it come down to? What do you, I know it's a silly question, but I would start asking, what do you do for outside employment? How do you make your money? How do you live in this house?
Is that a silly question in this, though?
I don't think it's silly, but I don't know if a lot of people would ask that, because I would want to know, how do you afford this?
Right.
You would think that he would be recouping that money
He needs to
somehow, and if he's not
recoup it.
selling it, how are you recouping the loss? Because
Where's
if
your-
you make
where's your
another one,
return on
another one,
investment?
Why don't you just ask him where his excess is at?
Well, let's look at that for a second, though, because what else can we look at in this to figure out if we can get a search warrant, how we can get a search warrant for the rest of the house?
Well, you know, typically when you've got an indoor grow or something of that nature, you know, that draws a lot of electricity. You know, you can contact the power company and, you know, have them do an audit on his, which will then give you work towards your probable cause for that search warrant. You can provide surveillance.
But we don't need it. We already have the
So let's
plain view
focus
in that
for a
part.
second, though, on the power, right? So you ask this guy what his power bill is. What do you expect? You got a 100-plant grow, you got 10 lights going up. What would you expect?
You're probably going to be looking typically $400, $500, $600, or yeah, a month.
Right. So if he comes back and tells you, I only have $200 a month, what are we looking at then?
We're looking at theft of electricity.
Theft of utilities. Do we really want to pursue that? Because what are we looking at?
Some good felonies.
Different felonies. We're looking at structure issues. We're looking at fires, right? So those are the kinds we're looking at. Is we're kind of thinking outside the box now. Is where don't get focused so much on I just have a marijuana grow, okay? And also, I mean, we're just getting a little further there, but we also want to start looking into what else. What might they be using the harvest for?
Sales.
Sales, and I mean, might they be doing
BHO.
something else?
BHO.
BHO, so we need to be careful, officer safety-wise, you know, be on the lookout for things that might lead us to believe, you know, if we see some butane canisters around or something like that. So we need to make sure we follow our policies, act correctly. So we need to be very articulate, especially with Prop 64 and the way everything's going. We need to articulate what we see, where we saw it. I mean, be very, very to the point on it, right? That way, when we do hand it over to detectives, I mean, what kind of report do I want from you?
Well, the more I document their answers, and then if I hand it off to detectives, and detectives read my documentation of our conversation, and they re-ask those questions and can see if he's answering the questions the same way.
Right.
You know, it helps with the validity of his statement and to see if he changes his statement over time.
Right, so we go back to locking in that statement first. Whatever that statement is, we lock them into that. Then if we come back through the end, I mean, we're doing the math. The math doesn't meet the statement, does it?
No.
So then when the detectives come in later on, now we can say, okay, wait a minute, what's really going on here, right? Okay. I think that's good for now. We can take a 5-minute break and come back.
All right, Sarge, do you want a tangerine?
No.
Yeah, well, I have a prescription for marijuana. Well, it's impossible for you to have a prescription because marijuana is a Schedule I drug, meaning that it has no legitimate or proven medical use, and it has a high instance of abuse. So it's Schedule I. Now, if a drug has no medical use, then the doctor, he can't prescribe that to you. He can recommend that possibly it might help you. So when people show you their paperwork, they're not showing you a prescription, they're showing you a recommendation.
Your recommendation is just merely a affirmative defense instrument. It doesn't protect the individual from, receiving a citation or having their drugs seized. The only get out of jail free card is the state issued card. If they don't have the state issued card, then the law is clear and case law is clear. There's no get out of jail free card.
Medicinal marijuana must now be recommended by an attending physician. Before, we would see these recommendations handed out by doctors who would do it under the guise of performing a physical examination for an ailment, when in fact the person would just go pay a small fee and be issued this recommendation.
I look at the recommendation. At the bottom of the recommendation is the doctor's name. I would say, hey, I can't specifically read the name on the recommendation. Can you tell me who your doctor is? The vast majority of the time, these individuals that you contact will say, I don't remember his name. I just went to him to get my medical recommendation, or they call it their script, for marijuana. This goes to show the illegitimacy of this examination. Here's another question. You look at the recommendation and it shows that the doctor's office was hundreds of miles away from where this person lives. So explain to me why you traveled 400 miles in one direction to see this doctor.
How often do you see this doctor? Have you seen this doctor prior to this? What ailments do you have? And those types of things to establish the credibility that this is actually their attending physician and not just what we may call a quote-unquote pot doctor.
Our medical marijuana, again, a misnomer many people are unaware of, is there's no age requirement to get a medicinal marijuana recommendation.
If it has a plant count on that recommendation, the doctor says, I recommend that they have 25 or 50 or 99 plants. Knowing what we know about the Supreme Court case in Kelly, we know a doctor is not qualified now to recommend a plant count.
When you see a lot of medical marijuana recommendations, they'll say up to 99 plants. If you look at 9 out of 10, they're going to say up to 99 plants. And the reason being is that on the federal level, once you get to 100 plants or more, it becomes a 5-year minimum mandatory.
Does that make the recommendation in and of itself invalid? Well, no. Through your investigation into this individual, through you investigating, is the marijuana they're cultivating reasonably related to their current medical needs, you make that determination.
In making that determination, officers can look to the 1997 Trippett case as the benchmark for setting the standard for reasonableness.
Possession of medicinal marijuana still must meet a reasonableness standard. So the officers can conduct a line of questioning as to how much marijuana the patient uses, how often they use, and then determine the amount possessed, and does that fall under a reasonable standard.
If this is a medical marijuana grow, which he already told us, we now know the standard for us to move forward is reasonableness. So having that in mind, we must ask some specific questions associated with reasonableness to determine if it is that.
That officer uses the word medicine throughout the interview, and that builds that rapport.
Surprisingly, a lot of these individuals that you talk to will take you into their home and show you their grow. Again, I want to re-emphasize here that we need to be as conversational and friendly with them as possible as we move forward.
One of the things I found with growers is they actually like to brag, for lack of a better term, about their grows. And by just feeding them a few questions and asking in a sincere way of, hey, well, tell me about your grow. I've had growers describe the entire process to me, with almost like a glow in their eye.
So let's just say hypothetically the person says, I use 2 grams a day. We know if we factor that out over a year's period of time, it comes out to be about 1.6 pounds. Dosage amounts for marijuana are normally about a half gram at a time. So if you use 2 grams a day at a half gram at a time, that's 4 dosages per day. If you use 4 dosages per day and each dosage keeps you under the influence or quote unquote medicates you for 3 hours, you're medicated 12 hours a day, almost your entire waking day. A concerning factor in here is, what does this individual do for a living? I operate heavy machinery at a lumber yard. I drive a school bus.
Every officer has the ability to request an emergency driver's license retest for medical purposes. Simply requiring them, either because of addiction to marijuana, the 23152C charge, or just the fact that they are chronic, constant daily users of marijuana, to basically be evaluated by the DMV for medical purposes, and let the DMV make the determination if they're allowed to keep their driver's license or not.
In coming up with a line of questioning for subjects who are claiming medical marijuana use privileges, it can be useful to keep a standard set of questions to work from. One list of specific questions that has been effective for others is known as the Big 7.
I think these 7 questions that we'll talk about can help you throughout your investigation from beginning to end to be able to lock somebody into a statement based off of use and cultivation that you can use throughout your investigation to determine if what they're using or possessing or cultivating is reasonable. Question number 1, who's your doctor? Ask to see the recommendation. Ask if they know who their doctor is. What is his name or her name? Question 2, what medical condition do you have that would require you to use marijuana? You're an expert in ailments. We all have injuries and illnesses and problems associated with us. Ask them specifically what their ailment is. Question 3, how much do you use on a daily basis to medicate yourself? If they don't know specifically on a daily basis, maybe ask them over a week and then divide that by 7 days. But try to lock them into an amount they use on a daily basis. Question number 4, how long do you feel the effects of the drug you just used? Typically, marijuana bud, 2 to 4 hours, so we'll average it about to 3. Question 5, what is your preferred method of use? The vast majority, 80 to 85%, will say they smoke it. Question 6, what time of day do you use? Based off what their ailment is and or what they do for a living, this may come into play. I operate heavy machinery. I drive a school bus. I use first thing in the morning before work. Question number 7, do you cultivate? And you may already know that or not, depending on where you contact this person. Do you cultivate? Yes or no. The follow-up to that is where and for who. So if they say no, then you don't need to ask the rest of that question. And if they say at my home and you're not already at their home, that helps establish probable cause for a crime that's occurring, potential crime that's occurring in a residence, for us to be able to continue pushing forward with our investigation.
It's also important to remember that there are outside adjoining felonies that are often committed with these grows. For instance, the theft of power. It's important to establish and ask this homeowner a simple question like, how much is your power bill? And their answer may be totally unreasonable. If it's below what you even pay for power for your home, know that there probably could be a theft of utilities going, because it takes a lot of electricity to run the grow lamps and process this marijuana.
You also want to ask, well, based on this type of grow, you want to start to find out his expenses. Because in the People v. Jackson case, we go back and we want to now focus on, is he in this to make a profit?
Oftentimes these marijuana grows are established and constructed in a very rickety manner that doesn't meet current building codes. Wiring may not be safe, and oftentimes these are discovered after a residential fire, and then it'll be determined. So we want to look at those areas, maybe contact outside adjoining agencies such as code enforcement to come inspect that.
We go in, we do our investigation. If we do execute a search warrant, we're going to want to recover any kind of financial documents that we can to show that they're operating for a profit. This isn't for, just to break even because they want to provide medical marijuana to a bunch of individuals.
Observations made by an officer or deputy on scene, if not documented properly in the report, typically don't happen and are not admissible into court.
Show that what they're possessing is way outside the scope of anything that could be used for personal use. Factor it out. I think 10 extra minutes in report writing will save you 2 hours of getting grilled on the stand by a high-priced defense attorney.
A solid, non-confrontational line of questioning, coupled with keen observations, are key to executing a successful investigation. Our next section details some challenges in dealing with marijuana-impaired drivers.
Think of it this way. We have drunk driving laws because when people, even though they're allowed to legally drink alcohol, that doesn't mean they can be impaired by alcohol and drive. Marijuana is the same way. Just because you can smoke it, that doesn't mean you can be impaired with it and then project an unsafe activity out onto the roadways.
I believe we're going to see an increase in people who are doing what they think they can lawfully do, which is ingest marijuana, but then when they operate the motor vehicle, they're going to operate that vehicle impaired. It's going to lead to dangers, and it's going to take specialized training to identify these drivers.
You need to learn the skill set to determine marijuana drugged driving. The good news is it's simple. There's a simple standardized process that if you follow, you can understand and determine influence and impairment.
We're going to see a lot more of these folks on the road that are impaired by marijuana, so we better be ready for it. And that's what we've taken steps to do, and I'm sure other organizations are going to follow suit.
Predictions of increased marijuana-related driving incidents are supported by alarming statistics from Colorado and Washington. Both states have witnessed the number of incidents of drugged driving rise since recreational legalization. In Colorado, traffic deaths where drivers tested positive for marijuana more than doubled from 2013 to 2016. Washington also saw the number of THC-positive drivers involved in fatal accidents double in 2014. With 1 in 6 drivers in those deadly crashes testing positive for active THC. It's pretty clear that every officer who investigates traffic-related incidents is going to need to prepare to effectively deal with the increasing number of drivers who get behind the wheel while under the influence of marijuana.
Stop this guy. 3 Frank 71, gonna be making a stop. Shit. 3 Frank 71, final stop, Blocker at Sea Lion.
Final stop, Blocker and Sea Lion.
Good evening, sir. The reason I stopped you is you unsafely pulled out in front of my patrolled vehicle. Did you even see me?
Well, in all honesty, I didn't even think you were that close.
Can you tell me where your driver's license is?
It's in my wallet.
And where's your wallet?
It's in my pocket.
Can you get it for me now, please? Is it that wallet right there?
Oh.
You handed me your bank card. Do you have your driver's license? And where's your registration and insurance? Anything to drink tonight, sir?
No, haven't been drinking.
Your eyes look really red.
Huh?
Your eyes look really red.
Oh, I was just tired.
Just tired? Okay. Can you step out of the vehicle for me? I'm gonna have you come out here and I'm gonna check you out, make sure you're all right. Go ahead and step out and walk around the front of your vehicle. Meet me on the sidewalk.
All right.
Walk around the front of the vehicle. Come on, walk with me back to the front of my car. That's good right there. Go ahead and turn and face me. Stand with your heels and toes together and hands down by your side just like that. Okay, we're gonna do some field sobriety tests. Partner, the paths. Just gonna have you blow into this machine until I tell you to stop, okay? Big deep breath. Blow. Stop.
Okay, so we're going to come across this a lot in our profession, right? Especially now. What was the initial reason why they stopped them?
Cut them off.
Okay. So, I mean, why might that be something? I mean, what are we looking at?
Perception and time. Vehicle traveling, coming at a certain speed, and he's not seeing it and paying attention.
Okay.
Pulling out into traffic.
His statement was,
Officer Carey on the
I didn't think you were that close.
Right. So once we got up there and contacted him, that was his statement, which goes right into the perception of, hey, I didn't think I was that close, and so. What are the observations that you saw in there? What did you see took place once the stop started and once you got out of your vehicle?
Slow responses. He put down the wrong window.
Right.
Eyes are bloodshot. Looking to see if his pupils are dilated.
What we saw in there was, I mean, you asked him to roll down the window. He rolled down the driver's side first, and the other one. You said slow response. I mean,
Slow responses when he's asking him for things. He's looking at him and then just starts patting himself when he asks for his license. Says that it's on him.
Right.
When it's right there on the seat.
Then what happened? I mean, what did he hand him?
Hand him a bank card.
Right. Could that happen sometimes?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
People get nervous on traffic stops, right?
Yeah.
So it's not that singular thing that happened that's going to lead us down any other road. It's just, what are we looking overall here?
Totality of circumstances.
What's that, Jeremy?
Totality of the circumstances.
Totality of the circumstances. That's what we're looking at, right? So, I mean, and you might have a little more expertise in what you've done in your careers. Why is that crucial as far as like marijuana? What are we looking at?
Reaction time, again. Loss of memory, basically. So you don't smell alcohol, and I'm sure that's what the officer in the video is seeing. If he's asking him if he had any alcohol to drink, he tells him no. Sees the edible, so you're not going to smell anything because you have that edible. Gets him out of the car. When he gets out of the car, he's unstable on his feet. He actually just stands there right when he opens the door instead of coming over to the sidewalk. Once he gets him on the sidewalk, he's slowing his movement, walks in an unbalanced manner.
So what about if the person does blow zeros, like we saw here? What else could we do?
Well, you can take a pulse, see what his pulse is, see if it's elevated, see if it's down. Marijuana usually will bring your pulse up. Check his eyes to see if they're dilated. Ask him to look in his mouth, look at his tongue, see if there's a green coating on the back, if he is smoking the marijuana.
Nystagmus.
So you'll see
checking for non-convergence.
You'll see lack of nystagmus. There'll be none, but you'll see LOC, lack of convergence.
And and that's going to be more specific for like marijuana if we see that?
Yes.
So explain lack of convergence a little bit.
So lack of convergence is when you more or less take your pen or stimulus and you paint their face and you're bringing the white of their eyes up and you bring it down to their nose. And what happens is when you cross your eyes come in and they're supposed to stay in. When you do certain drugs, depressants, inhalants, dissociated anesthetics, and cannabis, one of your eyes or your pupils can go outward from the center.
And that as compared to a normal person wouldn't.
They'll converge and stay in.
Okay. So those are some things we can do and note, and we're going to be writing all this stuff down. I mean, make sure it gets into the report. What are the other indicators that we're looking for as far as marijuana impairment?
Even if you don't get a pulse or you don't get some of the other things, if they're not able to complete the standardized field sobriety test and they're 000s on the PAS, there's some kind of impairment there. At that point, it's time to request a DRE if possible.
Right.
Basically, if they're making mistakes on those sobriety tests, they're going to be making mistakes in the vehicle, as we noticed when he pulled out in front of traffic.
Right. And that overall, that's where our documentation is going to start, right?
Correct.
Start to finish. Hey, he pulled out in front of me, all the way through everything I observed. Even the wrapper. I mean, what was the wrapper on the seat that we saw?
Looked like an edible.
Marijuana edibles, right? So, what's some questions that we might ask then?
Well,
you see the edible.
if we've observed it.
When's how much did you eat?
What's the THC level in his cookie? Or how many grams are in his cookie?
How much of the cookie? How much of the edible did you consume?
How long ago?
How long ago?
When did you eat it?
We'd have to ask the same standard questions for a normal alcohol-related DUI.
Right.
When's the last time you ate? When's the last time you slept? Did you sleep well? Does he consume marijuana normally? Is this his normal reaction to it as well? Because now we're running into all
If he's
sorts of
sick, if he's injured, anything
Medical
physically wrong with
conditions.
anything wrong with
He's
them.
taking any other medication?
It all comes down to your field sobriety test.
But if
Yeah,
somebody's
I mean, if he's
a
impaired, he's
.02, could they
impaired.
still be DUI?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Based on what?
Yes.
Just impaired.
Their impairment.
Their impairment to what they are to that. I mean, that could be their first time ever eating that edible, and they can be
Let's just talk about- I mean, if
low
we're looking-
tolerance. They haven't built any tolerance up to that drug.
Right. So if you have, let's go back to the DUI alcohol. If I've got somebody, I'm documenting everything up to that PAS anyways. Even if they blow a .04 on the PAS, if I thought they were DUI before and they're impaired to the point where they shouldn't be driving a motor vehicle, I'm still hooking them, right?
Yes,
Based
you just
on
not section. You do not charge them with the B
Based
section.
on their
So-
performance of their FSTs and the signs of impairment, they're
Right.
not safe to get back on the road. And
They're not safe to get back on the road and drive a motor vehicle several thousand pounds in weight, right?
right.
I don't want them driving and possibly hitting somebody in the road, my family member or something. That's all great points that we're making, and it's, like I said, it's not reinventing the wheel. We know how to do this job. We just got to think that the different outcome, and this might be what we expect to see more. I think that kind of hits everything we want to hear today, go over. So it's been great working with you guys. I want to thank you for letting me come here and talk to you guys. I want you to be safe out there, and we can go tonight.
Thank you, sir.
Cool. Thank you,
Thanks,
Sarge. Appreciate it.
I did everything I could to avoid their dodge.
That's what I've been trying to do.
Nice, check out that plate.
Boy, fire traffic stop at Chase and Semino.
Hello, ma'am.
Hi.
I am Officer Chibo with the River City Police Department. The reason I stopped you is because it looks like your license plate is barely hanging on.
Oh, really? I had no idea.
Could I see your license, registration, and insurance, please?
Yes, of course. Ugh.
Thank you. I'm smelling a lot of marijuana. Do you have marijuana in the car?
Yeah, I have just a couple of grams, but it's all legal. Thanks for letting me know about my license plate, though.
Sure.
Get going?
Go ahead and step out of the car. I'm gonna have you step up on the sidewalk for me.
Why, officer? I told you it's all legal.
I know. I just need to check out a couple things. I'm gonna go ahead and search your car. Is that okay with you?
No, what's the problem?
Well, I'm smelling a strong odor of marijuana. I'm gonna go ahead and search your car.
This is such crap. I need to go. I don't understand. I'm not doing anything wrong. Why she need to search my car?
Basically, she just saw some. Well, she was trying to make sure everything is legal. If everything is legal, then you'd be free to go.
Is this the marijuana you were talking about?
Yeah, that's my weed.
Okay.
Maybe I told her it was my weed.
Is this your bag?
Yeah, the bag is mine, but the stuff inside belongs to my patients.
Patients?
I'm a primary caregiver and I'm transporting that marijuana to my patients. It's medicine.
Medicine?
Yes, medicine.
Is there anything else in the car I'm gonna find?
Nope. Can I go now? I have to get going.
Just wait a second, okay?
Officers have to kind of, again, reset their minds to understand that impairment is impairment, and they need to look for and be trained to look for the impairment. With alcohol, you can be arrested if you're 0.08 or higher. And so people ask, prosecutors ask, well, what is the 0.08 in nanograms per milliliter of marijuana or THC in your system? You could have a tolerant user of marijuana who could have pretty high levels of nanograms per milliliter of THC in their system and not perhaps showing the same impairment as a non-tolerant user with much lower level.
So we have to rely basically on circumstantial evidence other than just our blood draw that we would get later on. So we need to be able to articulate his driving when he writes his reports. Everything he notices about these individuals, because every one of those little pieces of circumstantial evidence is very important when we're in trial to show why we believe this individual was driving under the influence of marijuana, because we can't just rely on the blood draw.
If I go up to a vehicle, I could smell the odor of either burnt or fresh marijuana. There is a difference in that smell. If I go up and they've got edibles, I can't necessarily smell anything out of that edible. And I'm not necessarily going to know if they consume that other than to look at other signs and symptoms.
As the officer then also sees an edible, it's important to note that there's basically the equivalent of an open container. It would be the same as if there were a bottle of booze sitting on the passenger seat.
Whenever you introduce the digestive system into an equation, it takes longer. And the stomach has a slower ratio of processing things than does the intestines. The intestines is where most of the digestion takes place in our body.
So we see common marijuana or tolerant marijuana users switch to an edible. They ingest the edible expecting the influence to hit almost immediately, and when it doesn't, they consume more than their normal dose, thinking that it's not as strong, and then they'll get a higher impact 45 minutes later.
You only need to look at states like Colorado, and you would see that the products that they have now are vastly different than the products they've had in the past. And when you have products that in an oil form that you can smoke and not smell it 2 or 3 seconds after you vape that material, that oil, then it's very easily to hide what you're consuming.
It's obvious if somebody's smoking a joint. It's not so obvious if they're eating a cookie or a piece of candy or drinking a soda that's infused with extracted THC concentrate.
I would never have expected that you would have cannabis-infused soda or chapstick or mints. Of all things, massage oils that you can get, different edibles such as gummy bears. The sky's the limit.
Classic marijuana impairment is displayed right from the beginning in this scenario. We have a driver who fails to yield. He pulls out right in front of the coming police car. Because when you're on marijuana, one of the impairment signs is you have trouble with time, distance, speed, distance type calculations. Problems processing simple instructions such as roll down the passenger window, not the driver window, the very slow, deliberate actions that the person's making. Again, all classic low to moderate dose marijuana impairment. The standardized field sobriety testing that would have been performed in this case would have shown some things like an inability to cross their eyes. It would have shown an increased pulse, would have shown probably dilated pupils, with possibly a rebound dilation reaction to light.
In the scenario, the driver blows zeros or triple zeros, indicating there is no alcohol on board, and it's important to know at this case, you still see signs of impairment.
And once we find out that impairment's not caused by alcohol, there has to be another reason. So a phrase that we commonly use is their impairment was inconsistent with their blood alcohol concentrate, or their BAC.
When the PAS shows 0 zeros, that's not the surprise for the person who is DRE or DAR trained.
And if nothing else, that officer can prepare that subject to be maybe looked at by a drug recognition evaluator. And the drug recognition evaluators have a lot more training. They have 72 hours of classroom instruction, and they can give an expert opinion on the category or categories that that person is under the influence of.
There's a lot of good courses out there available for the officer. There's the 3-day course taught by the California Narcotic Officers Association, Drug Abuse Recognition. There's the longer course taught by the International Association of Chiefs of Police, the Drug Recognition Expert program. There is standardized field sobriety testing courses.
So these classes are readily available for you. The California Peace Officers Association and other agencies, along with CNOA, continually offer training classes to further your expertise and further your training in your profession.
As the frequency of impaired driving from marijuana increases, it makes sense for officers to attend training that will assist them in identifying these drivers so they can be taken off the road. Next, we will have a special section with insight from our subject matter experts on proactively enforcing marijuana laws relating to existing and potentially upcoming businesses that may soon flood the industry.